Excuse me, I'm doing a survey for the school paper.
Huh?
Which do you prefer, a presidential or a parliamentary form of government?
I prefer presidential.
But why?
Because people get to vote directly for the head of the government.
Thanks.
No problem. Bye.
Bye.
So, how's the survey doing?
Just fine. I've asked several seniors already, and all of them prefer a presidential form of government.
It looks like the senior class prefers a presidential form of government.
Do you agree with their conclusion that the senior class prefers a presidential form of government?
No.
Why not?
Well, he hasn't asked all of the seniors. Some of them might prefer a parliamentary form of government.
But they might all prefer a parliamentary form of government.
Yes, they might be right. But then again, they might be wrong. There's not enough basis to make that conclusion.
That's right. They don't have enough basis or their premise was not sufficient. Their conclusion would be valid if they asked all seniors. It just so happens I have a similar problem right here. So, what conclusion can be made?
Well, based on what you gave us, it would seem that all prime numbers are odd. But we know that's not true, since 2 is prime and it's not odd.
Very good. This type of reasoning is the same as stereotyping.
Sir, what's stereotyping?
That's when you assume that a group of people exhibit the same characteristic even though some don't.
Oh, like when we say that Kapampangans are great cooks.
Or that Ilocanos are thrifty.
Yes, these stereotypes are based on casual observations. And we know that in stereotypes, there may be exceptions to the rule. For example, I'm Kapampangan and I cannot cook.
Oh yeah, we remember. Tried to cook spaghetti for us when we went camping.
See, I told you. Now, let's take a look at a different kind of reasoning.
But I can't make that conclusion based on the responses of a few seniors.
You're right. You better ask all of them then.
But where can I find them?
It's 3 p.m. All the senior classes end at 3, while the rest of us get off at 4.
Aha! So that student headed for the exit must be a senior. Hey, wait! I want to ask you something!
Was the conclusion made about the student headed for the exit valid?
Yes!
Is there a difference between the reasoning just used and the reasoning used in the previous situation?
I don't see any.
Well, let us tabulate the conclusions made and the basis or premises used in the two situations. In the first situation, what was the conclusion?
That all seniors prefer a presidential form of government.
And they based that on what premise?
They based that conclusion on several seniors answering that they prefer presidential over parliamentary.
Good. Now, how about in the second situation? What was the conclusion and the premise?
They concluded that the student headed for the exit at 3 p.m. was a senior based on the premise that senior classes end at 3 p.m.
That's right.
Oh, I see. In the first situation, cases were used to generate a rule. In the second situation, a rule was applied to a specific case.
Very good. These two types of reasoning have names. The type of reasoning used in the first situation is called inductive reasoning. And the type of reasoning used in the second situation is called deductive reasoning. Now, I'd like you to identify the type of reasoning used in the following statements.
Oh, in the first statement, a rule was used as the basis for the conclusion, so deductive reasoning was used.
That's correct. How about the second one?
I know. Inductive reasoning was used, since the conclusion was a rule based on cases.
Very good.
So we've been using inductive and deductive reasoning all along. But why are we studying it now?
Well, we will use reasoning to prove or disprove mathematical assertions we encounter.
But which do we use? Induction or deduction?
Which do you prefer?
I'd use deduction to prove something. At least I'm basing my conclusions on known facts.
That's right. In fact, proofs made by deduction are acceptable proofs. You've seen how induction can sometimes result in spurious assertions.
Oh yes, I remember. Like thinking that all prime numbers are odd.
So, some assertions may be true and some may be false. Keep this in mind as you watch this.
Hey Alvin,
Hi Chris.
what's that?
It's an old polygraph machine my dad bought as a surplus from Japan. He managed to revive it.
What does it do?
It's a lie detector. Do you want to be my test subject?
Or what?
Well, I've hooked up this polygraph machine to this computer and it will tell if you're lying or not.
Cool, I'm in.
Now, just answer yes to everything I say, okay?
Okay. Oops, I mean, yes.
I haven't started yet, silly. Okay, now, we begin. Is your name Chris?
Yes.
Do you come from the planet Mars?
Yes.
And your name is not Chris?
Yes.
And you don't come from Mars?
Yes.
Okay, that'll do.
Did it work?
I think so.
Great. Let's go get Anne. I have a few things I want to ask her.
As I have said, assertions or statements can either be true or false. Let's recall some of the assertions made in the video. What were they? And were they true or false?
One assertion was that his name was Christopher, which turned out to be true.
He also asserted that he wasn't named Christopher, which turned out to be false. Naturally, he was named Christopher.
Another assertion was that he came from Mars, which was false, of course.
Yes, and he next asserted that he didn't come from Mars, which is true, of course. Oh, look, the statements are opposite.
That's right. The second statement negates the first, and the fourth statement negates the third.
So if a statement is true and you negate it, it becomes false.
And the statement, which is false, when negated, becomes true.
You're both correct. Your observations can be summarized in what we call a truth table. In such a table, assertions or statements are represented by letters. In this case, P, and the negation of P is symbolized by what I'd like to call squiggle P, which we read as not P.
Oh, I see. I could say 4 is a prime, which is false, and negate that. And say 4 is not a prime, which is now true.
Excellent. So far, we've been studying single statements. What if we have two assertions in one statement? For example, I could say that I am a teacher and I am male. Are both assertions true?
Yes.
How about the statement taken as a whole? Is it true?
Yes!
But sir, what if one of the statements is false?
Could someone give us an example?
How about, I'm in high school and I'm married.
You are?
Sir!
Just kidding. I know you're not married. Now, class, take the statement as a whole. Is it true?
Is he married?
To help you visualize the problem, we turn to Venn diagrams. Consider two sets, A and B. Where does A and B intersect?
Sir, they intersect here.
Okay, and what can you say about the elements in that region?
Well, these elements belong to both A and B.
That's correct. Now, consider several elements, x sub 1 to x sub 4, as we complete the following table. Is x sub 1 an element of A?
Yes.
So, this statement is true. Is it an element of B?
Yes.
So, this statement is true. Is it an element of both A and B?
Yes.
So, this statement is true. Like when I say that I am a male teacher.
Oh, now I understand. The second element, x sub 2, is an element of A, but not an element of B. So, it's not an element of both A and B. So, when I said I was in high school, and I was married, the statement taken as a whole is false.
Very good. Now, how about x sub 3?
Sir, x sub 3 is the same case as x sub 2.
Okay. And what about x sub 4?
Well, it's not in A and it's not in B. So it's not in the intersection of A and B.
Very good. Now, let's replace the statements or assertions as P and Q. And we have the summary of truth values for statements with two assertions joined by the word and.
Oh, I see. A statement composed of two assertions joined by and is true if and only if both assertions are true.
You got it. A statement composed of two assertions joined by and is called a conjunction. The same method can be used to ascertain the truthfulness of a statement composed of two assertions joined by the word or what we call a disjunction.
It looks like a statement composed of two assertions joined by or is true if at least one assertion is true.
That's right. Now, if you treat and or as binary operations and replace true statements with 1 and false statements as 0, you come up with the simplest form of Boolean algebra, which is used in designing computer circuitry. The funny thing is, this was developed by a mathematician named George Boole, even before computers were developed. It was originally used as a means of juggling equations to reflect valid arguments.
Wow!
Surprising, isn't it?
It sure is.
So, we have learned about conjunctions and disjunctions. But there is another two-in-one type of statement. It is called conditional statement. This statement is composed of two statements or assertions, where one is the hypothesis or condition, and the other is the result or conclusion. In symbols, it is written like, for example, I could say that if 2 points are on a plane, then the line containing them is on that plane.
So, 2 points are on a plane is the condition, and the line containing them on the same plane is the conclusion.
Excellent.
But sir, if disjunctions and conjunctions have truth values, what about conditional statements?
Let's set up the table, shall we? Now, let's consider a simple statement like, if you submit your project early, then you will get extra points. Suppose you did submit your project early, and the teacher gave you extra points. So the teacher was not lying, right?
Yes.
Therefore, the statement is true.
Oh, I see. Now if I submitted early, but the teacher did not give me extra points, she was lying, so the statement is false.
Yes.
But sir, what if I didn't submit early?
Let me ask you this instead. Did the statement say anything about not submitting early?
No.
So whether you get extra points or not, we cannot say that the teacher lied. So the statement is considered true.
Ah, okay.
Now, let us consider the statement. If two lines are perpendicular with respect to a third line, then the two lines are parallel. And play around with it. What will happen if we switch the condition and the conclusion?
So the statement now becomes, if two lines are parallel, then the two lines are perpendicular with respect to a third line. But that's not true all the time, right, sir?
You're correct. The transversal of two parallel lines is not necessarily perpendicular to the lines. The resulting statement is what we call the converse of P then Q, which is denoted as Q then P. Now, what if I negate the condition and the conclusion? What will happen to the statement?
It becomes, if two lines are not perpendicular with respect to a third line, then the two lines are not parallel.
And that is called the inverse of P then Q, which is denoted as not P then not Q. Is the argument valid?
Well, it sounds logical, but the conclusion is not true all the time. For example, I can have these two figures. In the first one, the lines are not perpendicular to the third, and they are not parallel. In the second, they are again not perpendicular to a third, but they are parallel.
You're right. Now, if I negate the converse, what statement shall we have?
The statement now becomes, if two lines are not parallel, then the two lines are not perpendicular with respect to a third line.
Which is called the contrapositive of P then Q, and which is denoted as not Q then not P. Is the argument valid?
Yes!
Actually, if a conditional statement is true, its contrapositive is also true. In fact, the contrapositive of a definition is always true. For example, let us consider the definition of a triangle. What is its contrapositive?
A polygon that does not have three sides is not a triangle.
Good! And is this statement valid?
Yes!
Conditional statements and its variants are the building blocks of mathematical proofs. For example, let us prove that any odd integer is the difference of two perfect squares.
Wow! Really?
Really? Consider 1, 3, 5, and 7. Let us start with 1. Could anyone give me two perfect squares whose difference is 1?
All I can think of is 1 squared minus 0 squared.
That's right. How about 3?
Oh, I found it. It's 2 squared minus 1 squared. Hey, wait a minute. 5 equals 3 squared minus 2 squared. I see a pattern.
So do I. So 7 is equal to 4 squared minus 3 squared. But I can't figure out how to express the rule.
Don't bother. You will see it later. So is this enough proof for you that any odd number is the difference of two perfect squares?
If we say that, aren't we using inductive reasoning?
Yes. So is it enough proof?
Well, come to think of it, it's not enough. All odd numbers have to be tested.
I'm glad you said that. That's why, as I have said, inductive reasoning is not an accepted method of proving. Let us use deductive reasoning instead. But before we do that, do you remember the expression we used to denote odd integers?
I remember. It's 2a plus 1 for any integer a.
Okay, so here is the real proof. If we let a be any integer, what can you say about a squared plus 2a plus 1?
Well, if we factor it out, it will be equal to quantity a plus 1 squared.
That's right. Now, if I transpose A squared, I will end up with 2A plus 1 is equal to quantity A plus 1 squared minus A squared.
Hey, those are perfect squares.
And that's the proof.
That's amazing.
So, what have we learned today?
Well, we learned the definition of inductive and deductive reasoning, as well as determine which method an argument uses.
We also learned how to determine the validity of simple statements, as well as conjunctions, disjunctions, and conditional statements using truth tables.
And we learned how to construct the inverse, converse, and contrapositive of a conditional statement.
Well, I hope you have become better at arguing today.
Oh yes, sir. In fact, I can even argue that 1 plus 1 equals 0.
Really?
Really, sir. See here. If we let A equals 1 and B equals 1, then A equals B. I then square both sides of the equation and transpose B squared and get this, which can be factored into quantity A minus B times quantity A plus B. I then divide both sides by A minus B, leaving us with A plus B equals 0. Now, since A equals 1 and B equals 1, then 1 plus 1 equals 0.
Oh wow! 1 plus 1 is really equal to 0.
But that's impossible. There must be something wrong with the proof.
Yes, there is something wrong with the proof. Look at this part here. Since A is equal to B, then A minus B is equal to 0. You are dividing by 0, which cannot be done. I think I will take back the grade I gave you.
But sir, it was just a joke.
I know, and an old one at that.